Let me introduce myself. My name is Mark, I'm 48 years old, and I've spent the last 18 years of my life raising a daughter who isn't biologically mine. I'm a general contractor, running my own business, which has taken me from scrubbing floors to building mansions for the wealthy. It's hard work, but it's honest work, and I did it all for my family. My wife, Lauren, 45, is a teacher, or at least she was until she decided she wanted to stay home and focus on finding herself a few years ago. Then there's Chloe, 26, my stepdaughter. She works as a wedding planner and has always been the light of my life. Chloe's biological father, Greg, is 47 and, frankly, a deadbeat who vanished when Chloe was only 6 years old. When Lauren and I married, Chloe was this shy, sweet little girl with big, teary eyes. She didn't trust men, why would she? Her dad abandoned her and her mom like they were nothing. But I worked hard to win her over. I went to her school plays, coached her soccer team, taught her how to ride a bike, and even walked her down the aisle at her high school graduation. 4 years, I thought we were as close as a father and daughter could be. That's why, when Chloe got engaged to her fiancé, Adam, 27, I wanted to make her wedding day perfect. I offered to pay for most of it and even surprised her with a house. Yes, a house. The house wasn't just any house, either. It was a stunning, 3-bedroom craftsman-style home with a wraparound porch and a garden out back. I thought, what better way to start her new life? She cried when I handed her the keys. "Dad, you didn't have to do this," she said, hugging me. "You've always been so good to me." But as it turns out, all the love and sacrifices I poured into Chloe didn't mean a damn thing the moment her real dad came back into the picture. The drama began about 3 months ago when Greg, the man who walked out on Chloe and Lauren nearly 2 decades ago, reappeared out of nowhere. He was all polished up, driving a flashy car and spouting some sob story about how he'd been in a dark place and was now ready to be a father again. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured Chloe would see right through his act. But no, she lapped it up. Suddenly, Greg was showing up at family dinners, offering to help with wedding planning, and somehow worming his way into Chloe's life. It was a slap in the face, but I bit my tongue. I didn't want to make Chloe feel like she had to choose between us. Then came the bombshell. Last week, I was out in the garage cleaning up some old tools when I overheard Chloe and Lauren talking in the kitchen. They didn't realize I was within earshot. "I feel so bad about this," Chloe said. "You're doing the right thing," Lauren replied. "Greg deserves this moment. But what about Mark? He's going to be so hurt." Lauren's voice dropped to a whisper, but I could still hear her. "Mark will understand. He's a good man, but Greg's your real father. He should walk you down the aisle." I froze. Walk her down the aisle? Was this some kind of joke? I stormed into the kitchen. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded. Chloe looked like she'd seen a ghost. Lauren, on the other hand, had that deer in the headlights expression she always gets when she's caught doing something wrong. "Dad, it's not what it sounds like," Chloe stammered. "Oh, so you're not planning to let Greg walk you down the aisle after everything I've done for you?" Chloe's silence said it all. Lauren tried to calm me down, but I wasn't having it. "This is unbelievable. You're erasing me like I never mattered. I've been the one taking care of you since you were a kid, and this is how you repay me?" The argument escalated from there. Chloe had the audacity to say, "You'll always be my dad, but Greg is my biological father. He's back now, and I need to give him this chance." As if that wasn't enough, the next morning, I received an email from Chloe. She had decided it would be less stressful if I didn't attend the wedding at all. Greg didn't feel comfortable with me there, and Chloe wanted to avoid unnecessary drama. Unnecessary drama? I raised this girl. After the shock of Chloe's betrayal and being uninvited to the wedding, I decided to take a step back. I needed clarity. It wasn't just about the house or the wedding anymore, it was about respect. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. Chloe had always been loyal to a fault, almost to the point of being too trusting. But to not only replace me with Greg but also to uninvite me from her wedding, that was so out of character for her. And Lauren, her casual indifference during our argument in the kitchen was eating away at me. She had always been fiercely protective of Chloe, and now she seemed perfectly fine with erasing me from her daughter's life. Something wasn't right. I decided to do a little digging. If Greg thought he could waltz back into Chloe's life after 20 years of silence and take my place, I was going to find out how he managed it. A week later, I got my first break. I was at a local diner when an old friend, Tony, who works in collections, ran into me. We got to talking, and when I casually mentioned Greg's sudden reappearance, Tony raised an eyebrow. "Greg Carpenter?" he asked. Yeah, Chloe's biological dad. You know him? Tony leaned in, lowering his voice. I've seen his name pop up a few times. The guy's drowning in debt, credit cards, back taxes, even a pending foreclosure. My jaw clenched. That slimy bastard was broke. So, what was his game? Was he cozying up to Chloe for her wedding money, or worse, the house? I needed proof. I couldn't just accuse Greg without concrete evidence, or Chloe would never believe me. So, I hired a private investigator, Daniel, a no-nonsense guy who had helped me before when a subcontractor tried to scam my business. Within a few days, Daniel delivered a bombshell. Greg wasn't just broke, he was desperate. He'd recently been evicted from his rental property and was living out of a motel, but that wasn't the worst of it. Greg had been meeting with Lauren, not Chloe, Lauren. There were photos of them having dinner at a fancy restaurant, laughing like old friends, and then, a picture that made my blood boil, the two of them holding hands across the table. I confronted Lauren that night. Are you seeing Greg? I demanded, throwing the photos on the kitchen counter. Her face went pale, but she quickly recovered. It's not what it looks like, she said, her voice trembling. We've been talking, yes, but it's for Chloe. She wants us to be civil for the wedding. Civil? You're holding hands like you're on a date. Is this why you're okay with him walking her down the aisle? Are you two back together? Lauren's silence was deafening. She didn't even try to deny it. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. She finally looked at me, tears streaming down her face. A few months. It just happened, Mark. I didn't mean for it to. I cut her off. Didn't mean for it to happen. Are you hearing yourself? The man who abandoned you and Chloe waltzes back into your life, and you betray me for him? Lauren broke down sobbing, but I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness, just cold, hard anger. As if that wasn't bad enough, the next morning, I got another gut punch. Daniel called me with more news. Mark, I think you should know something else, he said cautiously. What now? Greg has been bragging to some mutual acquaintances that he's planning to move into the house you gifted Chloe after the wedding. He's calling it his fresh start. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. The house, that damn house. He wasn't just after Chloe's affection, he was planning to use her as a ticket to a free ride. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just betrayal. This was a scam. Greg was using Chloe to weasel his way into a cushy life. And Lauren? She was either too blind to see it or complicit in the whole thing. But you know what they say about betrayal, it's a double-edged sword. If they thought I was going to sit back and let this happen, they had another thing coming. After discovering Greg's plan to move into the house and Lauren's betrayal, something inside me snapped. All the years of sacrifice, love, and devotion I'd poured into Chloe and Lauren, they thought they could throw it all away for a man who had abandoned them. No, this wasn't going to end with me as the fool. If Greg wanted to play dirty, I'd show him I was more than capable of outsmarting him. But I wasn't going to act out of pure anger. No, I'd play this smart, calculated, and airtight. I wasn't just going to expose Greg for the parasite he was, I was going to make sure everyone involved felt the sting of their betrayal. First, I started with the house. Since I had gifted it to Chloe, I had the deed drawn up in her name, but there was a catch. The house wasn't fully transferred yet because the final paperwork required Chloe's signature, and conveniently, Chloe hadn't gotten around to signing it. Legally, the house was still mine. I called my lawyer, Angela, who had been with me through thick and thin in my business ventures. She was ruthless when it came to protecting her clients, and I knew she'd relish the chance to help me. Mark, are you sure about this? Angela asked after I explained the situation. Positive, I said firmly. I want the house back in my name, and I want it locked down so tight that not even a cockroach can squat there. She smirked. Consider it done. We'll draft a formal revocation of the gift. Legally, Chloe has no claim without the finalized transfer. You'll have full ownership again within a week. Next, I needed to cut off the wedding funding. I'd already paid for the venue, catering, and a slew of other expenses, but there was one big piece I still had control over: the honeymoon. Chloe and Adam were planning a lavish 2-week trip to Europe, all on my dime. I'd set up a payment plan with the travel agency, and the final installment was due in a few days. It was simple. I called and cancelled the payment. I left nothing to chance. I contacted every vendor I'd paid for and pulled the plug. I framed it as a change in financial circumstances and made sure refunds were sent directly to me. Now came the tricky part: exposing Greg. I knew Chloe wouldn't believe me if I just told her about his financial troubles and manipulative ways. She'd write it off as jealousy or bitterness. I needed undeniable proof, something so damning that even Lauren couldn't defend him. I called Daniel, my private investigator, and told him to dig deeper. I want every skeleton in Greg's closet, I said. I don't care if it's from 20 years ago or yesterday. If it's bad, I want to know about it. Daniel delivered faster than I expected. Turns out, Greg wasn't just broke, he was involved in several small-time scams. He'd conned a few women into lending him money under the guise of starting over and never paid them back. One woman even had a restraining order against him. But the smoking gun was this: Greg had been using Chloe's wedding as a way to solicit money from old acquaintances. He told them he needed funds to help his daughter get married and promised to pay them back once he got back on his feet. It was all lies, of course, and I had the emails to prove it. The last piece of my plan involved Lauren. As much as I wanted to cut her out of my life completely, I wasn't going to let her walk away without facing consequences. I started gathering evidence of her betrayal: text messages, emails, even financial records showing she'd secretly sent Greg money. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about protecting myself. If Lauren thought she could divorce me and take half of everything I'd worked for, she was in for a rude awakening. I scheduled a meeting with Angela to draft a prenuptial amendment. Since Lauren wasn't working and we didn't share major assets, I had the upper hand. As the pieces of my plan fell into place, I felt a grim satisfaction. I wasn't just getting back at them, I was reclaiming my dignity. They thought they could treat me like a doormat, but they were about to learn that actions have consequences. With everything set, I sat back and waited for the wedding day. If Greg wanted to play Dad of the Year and Lauren wanted to rewrite history, I'd let them enjoy their fantasy for now. Because when the day arrived, their world was going to come crashing down. The day of the wedding arrived. I wasn't invited, of course, but that didn't mean I wasn't watching. I had a front row seat, not at the venue, but behind the scenes, where I had set everything in motion to unravel their perfect day. The ceremony was set at the lavish Whitewood Gardens, the same venue I booked and paid 4 months ago. A sprawling estate with a picturesque lake and blooming flowers. It was Chloe's dream. What she didn't know was that my cancellation notice to the venue had gone through days prior, and the refund was already sitting in my bank account. Guests began arriving, only to find locked gates and a sign reading "Event cancelled by order of management." Confused chatter rippled through the crowd as they milled around outside. Inside the estate office, the staff had strict instructions: no entry without confirmation of payment. Naturally, there was no payment because I'd pulled the funding. Meanwhile, Chloe and Lauren were at the bridal suite, blissfully unaware of the chaos brewing outside. Greg, of course, was playing the doting father, sipping champagne and basking in his role as the hero who'd saved the day for his daughter. That's when I made my move. I'd arranged for Daniel, my private investigator, to deliver copies of Greg's financial records, scam history, and the incriminating emails to Chloe. I wasn't about to burst in like a movie villain. I wanted her to see the truth with her own eyes, away from Greg's manipulation. The envelope was discreetly handed to one of Chloe's bridesmaids, who delivered it to her in the suite. Chloe, curious and slightly annoyed at the interruption, tore it open. What happened next was better than I'd imagined. According to Daniel, Chloe's face went pale as she skimmed the documents. The room grew tense as she read about Greg's scams, his debts, and, worst of all, his plan to use her wedding to line his pockets. "Is this some kind of joke?" she reportedly demanded, her voice shaking. Lauren, who was sitting nearby, tried to brush it off. "It's just Mark trying to stir up drama. He's bitter, don't listen to him." But Chloe wasn't buying it. "Mom, did you know about this?" she asked, holding up the papers. Lauren hesitated, and that was all Chloe needed. "You knew, didn't you?" she accused, her voice rising. "You've been defending him this whole time, and you knew he was using me?" The confrontation exploded. Bridesmaids tried to calm Chloe down, but it was too late. The truth was out, and Chloe was furious. Outside, the guests were starting to leave, frustrated by the locked gates and lack of information. Adam, Chloe's fiancé, was running around frantically, trying to figure out what was going on. Then came the final blow. I had timed everything perfectly. While Chloe was confronting Lauren, the Whitewood Gardens manager arrived to deliver the news: the venue was no longer booked, and the wedding was officially cancelled. "What do you mean, cancelled?" Chloe yelled. "We've been planning this for months." The manager handed her a copy of the cancellation notice. "I'm sorry, but the payment was withdrawn. We're unable to proceed with the event." Chloe's eyes darted to the bottom of the notice, where my name was clearly listed as the original pair. "Mark did this," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. As if that weren't enough, Daniel had one more task to complete. He approached Greg, who was nervously pacing near the catering trucks, and handed him a similar envelope. What's this? Greg sneered, ripping it open. Inside were eviction papers. The house I'd gifted Chloe and that Greg was planning to move into was no longer hers. The deed was back in my name, and Greg's dreams of freeloading had just gone up in smoke. You've got 24 hours to vacate, Daniel told him calmly. Greg's face turned beet red. You can't do this, he shouted. Oh, I can, I said, stepping out from the shadows. I'd been waiting for this moment. Greg turned to face me, his fury palpable. You're pathetic, Mark. Jealous and pathetic. I smiled coldly. Jealous of what? A deadbeat scammer and a woman who betrayed me? Enjoy your last day in my daughter's house, Greg. After that, you're nothing but a homeless grifter again. Back in the bridal suite, Chloe was sobbing uncontrollably. She had lost her dream wedding, her house, and, most painfully, the image of Greg she had held onto for so long. Lauren tried to comfort her, but Chloe shoved her away. Don't touch me, she snapped. You knew he was a liar, and you let him ruin everything. I didn't stick around to see the aftermath. My work was done. The wedding was ruined, Greg was exposed, and Lauren was left to face the consequences of her choices. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, satisfaction, sadness, and a faint sense of loss. But mostly, I felt free. They thought they could replace me, disrespect me, and take advantage of my generosity. They were wrong. The fallout from that disastrous wedding day rippled through everyone's lives like a wrecking ball. The perfect image Chloe and Lauren had crafted shattered, leaving nothing but broken pieces in its wake. And as for Greg, well, let's just say karma paid him a long overdue visit. The day after the wedding that never was, Greg was officially evicted from the house. I made sure to personally oversee the process, just to watch the look on his face as he packed his belongings into a beat-up truck. His plan to live off Chloe's inheritance was dead in the water, and with no money and no home, he had no choice but to crawl back to whatever hole he came from. Not long after, his scams caught up with him. One of the women he'd conned filed charges, and with Daniel's help, I made sure her case had everything it needed to stick. Greg was arrested within weeks for fraud and is now awaiting trial. As for Lauren, she tried to contact me the next day. Mark, we need to talk, she said over the phone, her voice trembling. There's nothing to talk about, I replied coldly. You made your choice. Now you can live with it. She begged for forgiveness, saying she'd been blinded by nostalgia and that she thought Greg deserved a second chance. But I wasn't buying it. You didn't just betray me, Lauren, I told her. You betrayed everything we built together. You let that man manipulate you and hurt Chloe in the process. There's no coming back from that. I filed for divorce the very next day. With Angela handling my case, the process was quick and decisive. Lauren walked away with none of my business assets and only a modest settlement. She moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, where, as far as I know, she's living a quiet, lonely life. Chloe, on the other hand, wasn't as easy to cut out. Despite everything, she was still my daughter, or so I thought. She refused to speak to me 4 weeks after the wedding, blaming me for ruining her special day. But as the truth about Greg sank in, her anger turned to shame. I didn't know, Dad, she finally said when we sat down for coffee one afternoon. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she looked nothing like the confident young woman I'd raised. I thought he changed. I thought Mom was right. You trusted the wrong people, Chloe, I said gently, though my heart still ached. But you need to take responsibility for your choices. You pushed me aside for a man who didn't deserve it. That's not something I can easily forget. Her tears flowed freely as she apologized, but I could feel the rift between us. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. The real twist came a month later when Chloe did a DNA test as part of some trendy family ancestry project. The results revealed something shocking. Greg wasn't her biological father after all. Lauren had lied to both of us. Greg had walked out on Chloe not because he was a deadbeat, but because he knew she wasn't his. He'd been conning Lauren for years, playing the role of the remorseful ex, all while knowing Chloe wasn't even his daughter. When Chloe told me, she was devastated. All this time, I thought I was fighting for him, she sobbed. And he didn't even care. The revelation hit me hard. For years, I had stepped up as Chloe's father, loved her as my own, and sacrificed for her happiness. And yet, in her most important moments, she had chosen someone else over me. But despite the pain, I made my choice. You'll always be my daughter, Chloe, I told her. But if we're going to rebuild this relationship, it has to be based on mutual respect. I won't be a backup plan or a safety net. Chloe nodded through her tears. It wasn't the perfect reconciliation, but it was a start. As for me, I walked away from the mess with my head held high. I had protected my hard-earned success, exposed the liars in my life, and reclaimed my self-respect. I sold the house I had taken back and donated the proceeds to a charity for single fathers. If there was one lesson I'd learned, it was that true family isn't about DNA or grand gestures, it's about loyalty, love, and integrity. These days, I focus on myself. I've taken up traveling, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. And though the scars of betrayal still linger, I've learned to wear them as a badge of strength. Let them say what they want about me. The truth is, I did what any father would do, I fought for my dignity. And in the end, that's a victory no one can take away.